listening to the Pharmacy Podcast Network.
Digital therapeutics, known as DTX, are evidence-based therapeutic interventions driven by software to prevent, manage, or treat a medication disorder or disease. Pharmacists play a critical role in the adoption of digital therapeutics, and this series will provide the latest on the innovations in pharmacy care.
This is Digital Therapeutalks. I am your host, Todd Urey, founder of the Pharmacy Podcast Network. I want to give a shout out to Ned Milankovich. Dr. Milankovich is a well-known pharmacist throughout our industry, as well as a lawyer. So he always brings an interesting perspective to different subjects. He authored an article in Pharmacy Times over the summer. It was titled, "The Rise of AI in Pharmacy Practice Presents Benefits and Challenges." This is a great article. We're going to have this in our show notes. I will be following up with Ned. A shout out to Ned. I made him a hashtag years ago, hashtag Ned Said. And if Ned said, it's probably the case. So just a shout out to you, Ned. But I'm excited today. So we're going to dive into application in the usage of AI. And the closest we can get is how artificial intelligence is going to impact our patients and making it easier for pharmacists and our technicians and our care plan designers, our physicians to work together using artificial intelligence to really reach the patient where they are. I think of our mobile phones. I think of data. I think of a lot of things. It could be as imaginative as we could go, but I like bringing on experts to really dig into different subjects. So on Digital Therapeutalks, if you're listening to this podcast and you are also a scholar of artificial intelligence, a writer, someone who has applied AI in medication management or pharmacological follow-up and needs and planning. Let's talk. Today, Natalie Park. Dr. Park is here, founder of Pharmesol. I am so excited to have you here, Natalie, because I have a lot of questions, but welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So a shout out to Ritesh Patel, my fellow brother within the Finn Partners family. Thank you so much for introducing us to Dr. Park. Natalie, Pharmesol, when I saw this app demonstrated on your website, which is pharmesol.com, that's pharmesol.com, immediately I was like, okay, I gotta get Natalie on the show, Digital Therapeutalks, and let's talk about this usage of AI in the hands and a virtual assistant-like help for patients and really driving natural sounding conversations through texting as follow-up to treatment or anything that the physician and pharmacist teams have put together. Let's kick it right off and get into this. Tell us, what is Pharmesol?
Yeah, Pharmesol is a conversational AI for medications that enables healthcare organizations to provide personalized education and follow-up to patients taking medications. You can think of it as an AI assistant or a co-pilot to the pharmacist that can repeat the counseling that they already provided to the patient and also ask follow-up questions about how patients are doing. The great part is that it works 24/7 and is having these conversations with patients to bring actionable insight back to the pharmacist. Like, hey, your patient said they feel like this medication isn't working, or they're having trouble taking the medication and why that is. And it's gathering these informations on behalf of the pharmacist and providing support for the patients.
So that's exciting. And when I read some of the examples, it's extremely natural. I was very impressed by the interaction. Let's talk about application around a condition, let's say diabetes care follow-up, especially if we just got a patient on a new device. Maybe they started Omnipod therapy, or maybe they started using a Dexcom. Imagine the opportunity with Pharmesol empowering some of this follow-up and direction of how we can keep things going. I really think of adherence, but let's use diabetes as an example.
A great use case of this is repeating the instructions of how to use that device, right? Or it could be an injection pen, for example, that the pharmacist, may have already explained it to the patient, but we all know that patients can't remember all of those information. So when they go home, they may need a reminder. Wait, how does this work again? How do I really use it? For how long do I need to press this button, for example? So then the patient can ask, and then it'll give a real-time response back to the patient. Or patients may also have questions about, wait, how does this medication really work? What is blood sugar? What is insulin? So instead of patient, trying to Google these answers, and sometimes it can be difficult to find accurate and reliable answers. But by using Pharmesol, they know that, this information is vetted by expert pharmacists and is accurate information that they can rely on. And let's talk about another use case in diabetes. A lot of these diabetes agents cause GI side effects like nausea, vomiting, or diarrhea. And when we spoke with patients, a lot of them said that, they didn't realize that they were going to have these side effects. They started taking the medication and suddenly they were in the bathroom and they were like, what is going on? I'm scared. I don't know. Is this how it's going to be if I take this medication? So a lot of patients end up just stopping the medication themselves without telling, their pharmacist or physicians about it. And then we all know the story of, they come back to the clinic 3 to 6 months later. That's when the clinicians find out. So this is also the type of education that pharmacists can provide and remind patients, hey, this is normal. It's going to happen. But for most patients, this goes away over time. And we can also do that in a timely manner. So maybe, 3 to 4 days after the patient starts the medication, rather than info dumping all of this information up front, because again, then they feel overwhelmed and they may not remember this information.
Natalie, before we go any further, I want to pause and just say it's interesting to me, and it's not surprising because I see it happening in an accelerated form just in the last, especially like the last 3 to 5 years. Pharmacists are doing things I've never thought that they would be doing today when I entered pharmacy 20 years ago. And how did you go from deciding at one point in high school or college or wherever that you wanted to become a pharmacist? And then how did the bend in the road lead you to artificial intelligence and truly building something it's like rubber to the road? It's application. It's not just pie in the sky. So you got to tell our listeners about that.
Yeah, I think it actually, all of it just goes back to wanting to help patients with medications, which is exactly what pharmacists do. And, before starting Pharmesol, I was working at a health system and working with different physicians, pharmacists, nurses, ops managers to improve patient care. And I was working with, some of the most passionate clinicians who really truly went above and beyond to do that. But what I realized is that despite all that passion and desire, at some point, you simply run out of clinical capacity. And you cannot provide this personalized support and care for every single patient every single day. That's just not possible with human resources. So that is what led me to decide, I think what we need is a product that really executes the work itself. And, at this point, I wasn't necessarily thinking AI. It was more so just realizing that I think we need a solution that does the work rather than, simply waiting for clinicians to use it. Because again, clinicians are already, doing as much as they can. And then what my team, decided is that this artificial intelligence or large language model is a really good tool and technology to leverage because it allows us to have such fluent human-like conversation. We could build an automated product without AI. We could build a product that is automated, but as I think a lot of us have experienced, that patient experience, user experience just wouldn't be as good because the conversation would be limited, and maybe I would have to force the patient to respond with just yes or no. Like, just say yes or no.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm not going to understand what you're saying. But, large language model really allows us to have that fluent conversation and capture the nuances of patient response, right? It's not about, do I have nausea, yes or no? It's about, how severe is it? Like,
Yep.
What is that really like? And that's what this technology allows us to capture.
I like this example that's on our screen right now. If you are watching on YouTube, you'll see the screen. If not, let me describe this to our listener. On the screen, we show Pharmesol's app where it reached out to the patient at probably whatever specific time was defined as that good follow-up. And it says, have you been able to start Prozac? And the patient responds, yes, but I don't really feel better. And now the artificial intelligence sends back, Pharmesol sends back, because it takes time for your brain chemistry to adjust. It will take about 2 to 4 weeks for you to feel an improvement. And then its next text says, if you don't feel better in about 1 to 2 weeks, don't give up and stick with it, and I'll check in with you. And then, of course, they respond with TY, thank you. I just think that this is brilliant. I think that we've been able to take a large amount of data as it will continue to increase. We've married that and infused that with artificial intelligence prompting to say things that sound human. And we have the ability to lower the stress level of our patient feeling like they're all alone in this treatment, tying it back to a pharmacist's care and being able to document what was said so that the next time the pharmacist and or the physician or whoever gets in touch with the patient, they could read these notes, they could be updated immediately about what interaction was happening with that specific patient, and it be seamless so that you get to the next, you could repeat over again. Hey, I know when you started out, let's call him Ken. Hey, Ken, I know when you started out, you might not have feel better, but now it's been 2 more weeks later. How are things going? And Ken's like, you know what? It does seem better now. And you kind of followed up. Well, that was pulled right from the AI's documentation, having that accessible to the patient's record, and then moving forward. And that's the fusion. That's where we don't lose. People say, oh, AI is going to take away jobs and blah, blah, blah. I think it's an enhancement to keep things in parallel, to keep things going. And like you said, 330 million people in the United States, right? 304,000 active pharmacists. Do the math. There's not enough pharmacists per, the need for each of those people. So this is really helping to keep it going and make it contextual.
Yeah, I can definitely tell you that there are not enough pharmacist hours, and there are so many patients who need help, so many patients where, their regimen could be reviewed by pharmacists and be improved and lead to improved outcomes. That's why we want to do some of these tasks of information gathering, right? Another follow-up that we do for patients taking, medications for depression is asking that question again at 2-week and then 4-week. And once patient says, no, I'm, still not really feeling better, one of the questions our system will ask is, have you missed any doses? Because that changes your decision-making. And we want to help pharmacists and clinicians by bringing that information So they can do the really important cognitive task, and that so that they have the time to do the cognitive task of what does this mean? Does this mean, I need to change the dose? Does this mean I need to consider a different agent? Because that's what really patients need. And I mean, that role, it needs to be performed by a clinician. And so, this example comes from, again, talking to patients. When we asked a lot of patients, hey, how is your experience with taking medications? What are the areas that are challenging for you? And this is a common challenge that we see in the population that are taking medications for depression, right? Not having the correct expectation and then feeling discouraged. And then similarly to actually the diabetes example I mentioned, they stop taking the medication. And then, of course, their condition can't improve. So as you said, setting the right expectation, giving them the right information, because we have the information. We just need to deliver the information. And we also need to make sure that patient knows that their clinician is there for them. You can reach out to us at any time. And then, if there is a clinician intervention that's needed, we would escalate the information back to the clinician. And what this also allows us to do is to have a really granular understanding of patient journey. Because as I said, because of limited human resources and clinical capacity, right now, we're not asking patients how they're doing, how they're feeling, what they think about the medications, what their challenges are with the medication on a daily basis. But because Pharmesol is an automated product that leverages AI, we can have this conversation with patients on a daily basis. What that means is we're going to have the most granular insights into patients' journey. Even things like, do patients think this ointment is too sticky? Mm-hmm. Or are they running into coverage issues at the pharmacy? Because as you saw, one of the questions we ask is, hey, have you been able to start this medication? Mm-hmm. Or, are they feeling dizzy? Are they feeling nauseous? Does that happen at day 3, day 7? And the prevalence of those experiences, does that differ by different characteristics like gender, age, race? So we can really start to understand what the patient journey is. And then we're using those insights back into our system to optimize and improve, our understanding, and then personalize for that patient's experience. And then hopefully we can also predict patients' experience based on, their characteristics. So in the future, we can also provide insights back to the clinicians like, hey, based on our data, this patient is likely to experience more severe side effects from this medication. So maybe that can also inform you on your prescribing decisions. That can be another data point that we bring. So, think of it as like similarly to pharmacogenomics. How do we use that data? It's informing you of your prescribing decisions. Those are also the kinds of insights that Pharmesol can collect and bring back to clinicians.
All right. We'll be right back. When we do, we're going to talk about the fusion of digital therapeutics and Pharmesol and some of the examples and questions that I have for you, Natalie. We'll be right back. Hey, welcome back to Digital Therapeutalks. I'm here with Dr. Natalie Park, founder of Pharmesol. This is artificial intelligence, useful artificial intelligence that's really applicable to specifically what's going on with our patients. I can see how this is going to drive adherence. Natalie, you've given us some amazing examples. I want to shift the gear over to digital therapeutics, and my imagination begins to run, knowing what little I know so far of Pharmesol. But every time I talk to you, you get me excited about where this could go. And I'm thinking of, for example, the smart inhalers. So we have digital inhalers that enable like the asthma or COPD patient. They're gaining more control over that disorder with, they're able to like identify triggers or connect and share information with their medical providers and collect valuable research data of what's going on in their life with their therapy. And I'm thinking, so that technology, it sounds useful, facilitating the adherence, keeping up with treatment schedules, dosing reminders. But when I'm reading through some of the papers, I'm reading some of the white papers that are talking about, the thing that we're missing is the human element to it to really kind of keep things going. So what's the world of the API, meaning like the interface between the language engine and the reaction engine of what you've built and some of these digital inhalers for? That's a really good one, the example, but really it's the whole world of digital therapeutics.
Absolutely. So I really see products like the digital inhaler that essentially tracks when patients are using the inhaler. We can also see when patients are not using the inhaler, right? But what we're lacking is context around patient experience. Why did you use the inhaler, or why did you not use the inhaler? So that's the trigger we can use as an entry point to ask what's going on. Hey, what was your experience that you just had? Did you have an asthma attack? Is that why you used it? Or, hey, I noticed that you haven't been using your inhaler. Is there a reason for that? So we can come in and ask those questions. These are the questions that clinicians would want to ask, right? And the good thing is that we can come in right when we notice this trigger, so that patients aren't being asked these questions 3 months later. And then, of course, they're not really going to remember what they were experiencing at the moment. And what this allows us to do is understand the complex and personal challenges with patients. There may be, sets of patients who behaved the same way when you're looking at this data that's coming from these smart inhalers. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean their personal experience was the same. And to understand each patient's specific situations and reasons for their behaviors, the only way to really find out is by talking to them and asking them questions. We already know that there are so many different potential reasons for non-adherence, for example. It may be them experiencing side effects or having the fear of side effects. It may be just convenience issue, time, cultural issues, denial, depression, or just the complexity of the treatment is a barrier for them. But without understanding this patient-specific challenge, the chosen intervention may not work for them. And it doesn't make sense to try to solve this problem without understanding patient situation. So this is why it's really important to understand the context behind patients' behaviors. And this is how we augment, other technologies like smart inhalers. There are other wearables that tracks your blood pressure, blood glucose, or there are smart sensors on the pill bottles. But what does that really mean? What do these behaviors really mean is what we can bring and what we can help and augment these technologies.
So what other applications are you currently in investigation of, such as, I think of pediatrics, for example. Wow. But the worried parent. I have 4 daughters, so I remember the worried parent phase, especially with my firstborn, where it was my first time being a dad. My 2-year-old is crying. I go to the crib, pick her up, change her, and she's super hot. She's got a fever. That worries any parent for the first time. By the time you hit your third, you're like, all right, we'll see what happens. You're always worried, but not as worried. But imagine in that instance having the Pharmesol app where I could say right to the AI, just took my daughter's temperature. She's 2 years old. She's how much is a 2-year-old? 30 pounds, 35 pounds. She's 30 pounds. last time she ate was 9, p.m. or 9 p.m., had some ice cream or whatever. You could really feed it data and then put enter. And then all of a sudden it starts talking to us and it's like, hey, sorry to hear about, your daughter having her fever. I mean, we could sit here for hours and give examples, but that is badass. Like that is awesome that we could, and then you could literally say in that same text at 3 a.m, the nearest pharmacy to you, whomever, community pharmacy or independent or chain or whatever, maybe it's even the one that they listed in their profile. They could say, hey, they open at 9 a.m. Make sure you reach out, tell this, blah, 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 whatever it is that the next stages is to keep them going. And I think it's going to help healthcare to not trip and miss an opportunity to get the patient to go to the next phase and the next stage in the reach out. So that's exciting. But talk to me about other applications and even pediatrics, like we were saying.
Yeah, I mean, briefly on pediatrics pharmacy, that's definitely an area where pharmacists can bring so much value, right? Because exactly, as a parent, it's such an anxious time. And pediatric pharmacy, there are more weight-based dosing. For an inhaler, for example, you might be using a spacer. So there are these other complexities where pharmacists can really help. Other use cases where, Pharmesol can be used for is the perfect place is transition of care, which we also know is a time where pharmacist intervention is really valuable. And related to that is medication reconciliation, for example.
Yep.
Despite all the data that we have and interoperability and connecting different data sets from, claims data to point of sale data at the pharmacy, and then what's in the clinic in the electronic health record, you still really have to talk to the patient at the end of the day to really understand what they're taking and how they're taking, but because that's part of the equation. What the patient got filled or picked up, it gives you really valuable information, but you need to know a little bit more. And there are things like supplements and OTC that you may not be able to see in these kind of data. So that's another place where Pharmesol can really help, because this is a perfect example of we already know all the questions to ask and we can just automate it. And then we can bring back the information. This is what the patient said. And they stopped taking this medication because actually their cardiologist recommended that they do.
Yep.
Or they stopped taking it because it actually became unaffordable. And these are the informations that we can bring. And again, this is where clinicians come in and do the cognitive task. Okay, so what does that mean? What do I have to do?
This is terrific. I think that the rise of AI is now here. It's usable. I want to think of our listener right now. It's important that I'm thinking of someone driving right now on their way to a shift or on their way to work, or a specialty pharmacist, or someone focused on our seniors. Who's the ideal listener at this stage of Pharmesol that you want to be listening to today's episode, so that the next phase is reaching out to your organization to really begin possibly working together? Describe to the listener where Pharmesol's at right now.
One area of pharmacy where I think Pharmesol can bring a lot of value is specialty pharmacy, for example.
Amen.
Because
I was thinking the same thing.
Specialty medications are going through specialty pharmacies for a reason, because these are complex medications, oftentimes confusing instructions or difficult instructions with a lot of injectables. And specialty pharmacies check up on patients to see how they're doing. Is this medication working? Are you experiencing any side effects? And conducting the adherence assessment. And I think I've already sort of described how a lot of these questions can be automated. And it's not just automating the workflow, but actually automating the conversations. Based on patient's response, our system will actually automate even a follow-up. You don't have to click a button to say, or, make yourself a note, follow up with the patient in about 2 weeks. So I'd love to, chat with pharmacists who are working at specialty pharmacy and are looking for ways to improve their operational efficiency, but also improve patient care. Those who want to provide a tool resources for patients to be there for them 24/7 in after hours of the pharmacy when you're not reachable yourselves, or on the weekend, for example. But really, I think Pharmesol can bring so much value to any organization that are facing similar challenges, right, in other populations, not just specialty medications. We can bring value to health plans, pharmacy benefit managers, to pharma patient support programs, where they're currently staffing clinicians to have these sort of conversations with patients. So if there's an organization or pharmacists that are really interested in using technology to improve patient care, I'd love to chat.
Absolutely. I want to give a shout out to the NASP, the National Association of Specialty Pharmacy. We are their media partner for the fourth year in a row, attending the Specialty Pharmacy Premier event on September 18th through the 21st at the Gaylord Texan Resort down in Grapevine, Texas. This is the annual event for all leaders in specialty pharmacy. A shout out to Sheila Arquette, CEO and leader of the NASP. It's going to be a wonderful event. If you can come, Natalie, I'd love to have you there and introduce you to the entire specialty pharmacy industry, as many people as I can get. That is, I don't know if I could I don't know if I could get the entire industry to know you, but I'll try my damn hardest.
So actually, my co-founder Samya will be attending the conference. Awesome. So if anyone is, gonna be there and want to chat with us, they should definitely reach out.
We will do a follow-up and we'll have your partner on the post show for the NASP just as follow-up, just to get a snippet from the next perspective on this. But also a shout out to CPESN. That is our Community Pharmacy Enhanced Services Network. This is by state, this amazing network of pharmacists doing clinical treatment plans that move outside of just the dispensing fee. Because when I start thinking of Pharmesol, I also think of the application in disease state management where pharmacists fit best. And don't even get me started on pharmacogenomics. When you said that, Natalie, I was like, oh God, here we go. Like I'm going to spring into action because I love PGX and where this could go with follow-up to assure that a medication that is prescribed is working as intended. And is it being broken down in someone's system based on the way they break it down because of their DNA? So I can't wait to have you back and talk more with you, Natalie. You are fascinating. Pharmesol is fascinating. It's so good to have you part of Digital Therapeutalks. You got to come back. We got to have you maybe on Twerks This Week in Pharmacy, but let's keep going. I think we're going to meet up in Boston when we're covering the SoftWriters annual event. SoftWriters is the makers of Framework LTC, pharmacy management system for our long-term care institutional pharmacies. But I look forward to meeting you, Natalie, and I can't wait.
Likewise. It'd be great to meet in person.
I know. I'm tired of all this Zoom stuff. Zoom's nice, but I'd rather be in person as myself. All right. Pharmesol, you got to look them up. PHARMESOL.com, pharmesol.com. And you can reach out to Natalie and her team, ask more questions. But Natalie, this has been great. I really appreciate your time today.
Likewise. It's been such a pleasure. It's been so fun. Thank you so much for having me.